Welcome to the Sci-Fi. I'm Joe, your narrator. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more stories. The wind screamed across the GTA habitat's snow-blasted plains, a symphony of cold death that rattled the steel walls of the human outpost. Inside the command center, Roy leaned back in his chair, boots propped up on the console. Another night shift, another blizzard. He stared at the flashing sensors on his monitor, all of them green and uninteresting. Harms. Remind me why I'm awake at this hour again, he muttered to the base's AI. Because you pulled the short straw for perimeter duty, the AI replied, its tone perfectly deadpan, and because no one else wanted to freeze their extremities off in case of a sensor malfunction. Roy sighed. If it's all green, I might as well. A sharp beep interrupted him. The proximity alarm flashed on the screen, the icon marking an intruder approaching from the southern sector. We got movement, Harms noted unnecessarily. One life form detected, Bechtel, approximate body temperature dangerously low, likely to die of exposure in less than 5 minutes. Roy was already grabbing his coat and plasma pistol. He jammed his helmet on and headed for the airlock. Figures, can't be a boring shift, can it? He stepped into the freezing night, the HUD in his visor painting the terrain in shades of green and blue. Snow lashed at him like angry knives, and visibility was near zero. But there, stumbling toward him, was the figure. She was tall, purple-skinned, and barely dressed. A shimmering shawl clung to her shoulders, doing little to cover her curvaceous figure, and a pair of metallic gauntlets adorned her forearms. Long, wavy brown hair spilled over her shoulders, flecked with frost. Her lips, a striking crimson, quivered as she struggled forward. "Human," she gasped, her voice shaky but melodic. "I'm freezing. Let me in. I'll reward you." Roy blinked. Of all the things he expected to find on a snow-blasted alien world, a half-naked Vias woman wasn't one of them. "You're going to freeze to death out here," he said, reaching out to steady her. Her skin was ice-cold to the touch. "Come on, let's get you inside." She clung to him as he guided her back to the airlock, her trembling body pressed against his armored frame. "I knew humans were kind," she murmured, her breath fogging up the visor of his helmet. "But you're strong too. My name is Fiva." "Roy," he replied, trying to ignore how soft her voice sounded despite her chattering teeth. "We'll talk once you're not about to turn into an icicle." Inside the base, Roy set her down on a bench near the heater. He handed her a thermal blanket, which she draped over her shoulders with a dramatic sigh of relief. "You saved my life," Fiva said, fixing her large amber eyes on him. "How can I thank you, Roy of the humans?" "First, you can tell me what the hell you were doing out there dressed like that," he said, crossing his arms. She tilted her head as if the question baffled her. "Is this not appropriate attire for humans?" She gestured to the bikini she wore beneath the blanket. "I wanted to make a good impression." Roy resisted the urge to groan. "It's a snowstorm, Fiva. You're lucky you didn't freeze solid." Fiva's lips curved into a mischievous smile. "Perhaps I wanted to see if a human would be brave enough to save me, and you were." She leaned closer, the blanket slipping just enough to reveal more of her smooth violet skin. "Now, about your reward." "Okay, hold on," Roy interrupted, taking a step back. "I didn't save you because I wanted anything in return. Let's just focus on keeping you alive for now." Fiva's smile widened. "Oh, but I insist. These women always repay their debts, especially to brave warriors like you." Roy sighed, realizing he wasn't going to win this argument tonight. "Fine. Let's start with you telling me why you're here. And don't give me that making a good impression nonsense." Fiva's expression turned serious, though the glimmer of mischief never quite left her eyes. "I'm not like the others in my clan," she said. "They seek war, but I seek something different. Adventure, discovery, humanity." Roy raised an eyebrow. "You're saying you're a pacifist?" "Not exactly," she admitted. "I'm more of a curious soul. Humans intrigue me, your resilience, your technology, your charm." Her gaze lingered on him in a way that made him suddenly self-conscious. "Great," he muttered, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "So you're basically a tourist. Do you know how much trouble you've caused just by being here?" Fiva's pout was almost comical. "You're angry with me? But I risked everything to come here. I even faced the coldest storm of your human outpost. Surely that proves my sincerity." "It proves you're reckless," Roy shot back. "Look, I'll help you, but you need to promise me you'll stay out of trouble." Fiva's face lit up. "You'll help me? Truly?" Yeah, Roy grumbled. Just stay put while I figure out how to explain this to my Kyo. Roy's attempts to report the incident were predictably fruitless. His commanding officer dismissed him with a wave of the hand, muttering something about distracted by vice antics. Meanwhile, Fliva had made herself at home in the officer's lounge, much to the delight and confusion of the other soldiers. "Roy, who's your friend?" one of them asked, a smirk on his face. "She's not my friend," Roy replied quickly. "She's a guest, and she's leaving as soon as I can arrange transport." "Oh, but Roy," Fliva said, settling up to him, "you said you would help me. Are you going to abandon me so soon?" The other soldiers exchanged knowing glances, some barely suppressing their laughter. Roy could feel his cheeks heating despite the cold. "I'm trying to help you," he hissed. "But you're not making it easy." "I never said I was easy," Fliva replied with a wink. Roy sighed. "Harms, I'm going to regret this, but do we have any spare quarters available?" "One unoccupied unit in the East Wing," the AI replied. "Though I must caution you, Lieutenant, unauthorized aliens in military housing is a violation of protocol." "Noted," Roy muttered. "Fliva, come on. Let's get you settled." Once they reached the small Spartan room, Fliva immediately began exploring, poking at the wall console and examining the minimalist furniture. "Humans live so efficiently," she observed. "It's fascinating. But there's one thing I don't see." "What's that?" Roy asked wearily. She turned to him, her smile playful. "A place for my reward." Roy groaned. "You're not letting this go, are you?" Fliva stepped closer, her voice dropping to a softer, more intimate tone. "I'm serious, Roy. You saved me. In my culture, that's no small thing. I owe you a debt, and I always repay my debts." Before Roy could respond, she reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers warm now from the heater. "Besides," she added, her teasing tone returning, "I've never kissed a human before. Are you going to deny me that experience?" Roy's breath caught. The mix of humor and sincerity in her voice was disarming, and for a moment, he found himself staring into her amber eyes, unsure of what to say. Fliva closed the distance, her lips brushing against his in a kiss that was surprisingly gentle, a contrast to her bold personality. "See," she whispered, pulling back slightly. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" Roy's mind raced. He knew he was treading dangerous ground, but as Fliva leaned in again, he decided he didn't care. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, as Fliva's fingers brushed his jawline. Roy felt a warmth spreading through him, a stark contrast to the icy winds outside. For all her flirtation, there was a surprising tenderness in the way she touched him, as though she were discovering something sacred. He allowed himself a moment to reciprocate before gently pulling back. "Fliva," he said, his voice low, "this isn't exactly regulation." Fliva tilted her head, her mischievous smile returning. "Regulation? Is that another word for the human concept of hesitation?" He sighed, a hint of a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You're impossible, you know that." "I prefer irresistible," she replied, her amber eyes gleaming. "And I told you, I'd repay my debts." Roy chuckled despite himself. "All right, let's focus. You're safe now. What happens next? What's your plan?" Fliva moved to sit on the edge of the small cot, wrapping the thermal blanket around herself like a queen's robe. "My plan? To experience humanity, of course. Starting with you." He raised an eyebrow. "And after that?" She hesitated, her playful demeanor softening. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just wanted to get away from the endless planning, the posturing, the talk of war. My people see humans as rivals, but I see something more intriguing." Roy sat down on the chair opposite her, studying her expression. For all her teasing, there was a sincerity in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. "Intriguing, huh? You've got an interesting way of showing it." Fliva leaned forward, her tone turning serious. "Tell me, Roy, do you believe humans and VS could ever truly understand each other?" He considered the question. "I think it depends on the people. Most of my crew would say no, but me? I think it's possible. Maybe not easy, but possible." Her smile returned, softer this time. "Then perhaps I've chosen well." The next few hours passed in a haze of conversation and shared stories. Fliva's curiosity about human life was insatiable, and Roy found himself answering questions about everything from Earth's oceans to the taste of coffee. In turn, she shared tales of VS traditions, her clan's obsession with strength and dominance, and her own rebellious streak. As the storm outside began to subside, Fliva stood and crossed the room, stopping in front of Roy. Her gaze was steady, her expression unreadable. "You've given me more than shelter tonight," she said softly. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. What's that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hope, she replied, leaning down to kiss him again. This time there was no hesitation. Roy let himself be swept up in the moment, his hands finding their way to her waist as she slipped into his lap. The thermal blanket fell to the floor, and for a time, the cold world outside ceased to exist. Later, as they lay tangled together on the cot, Fiva rested her head on his chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his skin. Tell me something, Roy, she murmured. Do humans always act so noble when they're alone? He chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Depends on the human. She smiled, her eyes drifting shut. Then I think I've chosen the best one. Roy stared at the ceiling, a mix of emotions swirling within him. Whatever came next, he knew his life on GB-98 would never be the same. The following morning, the storm had cleared, leaving the base coated in a fresh layer of snow. Fiva insisted on accompanying Roy to the command center, much to the amusement of his crewmates. Looks like you made a friend, one of them teased. Something like that, Roy replied, unable to hide the small smile on his face. As the day unfolded, it became clear that Fiva's presence was going to complicate things, but for the first time in a long while, Roy found himself looking forward to the challenge. Their quiet morning was shattered when the proximity alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the command center console as Harms announced, multiple hostiles approaching from the eastern perimeter. Life signs consistent with Vias commandos. Roy's stomach dropped. What the hell? Fiva's expression darkened. They've come for me. Who? My clan, she said, her voice grim. They must have tracked me. They won't tolerate my fraternization. Roy swore under his breath. Harms, alert the base. We're going on lockdown. And prep the mech suit. The mech suit? Fiva asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, Roy said, grabbing his plasma rifle. I hate piloting the damn thing, but desperate times, right? Fiva smiled faintly, her defiance returning. Then let's show them what a human and a rebel Vias can do. The battle that followed was chaos. Plasma bolts lit up the snow-covered landscape, painting the blizzard in flashes of blue and red. Roy, strapped into the lumbering mech suit, felt the tremors of each step as he unleashed a barrage of suppressive fire. The suit's targeting systems whirred, locking onto incoming enemies and firing bursts of high-energy plasma that melted the snow beneath their feet. Fiva, unencumbered by heavy machinery, darted between the attackers with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. She threw gravity mines with pinpoint accuracy, watching as her enemies were caught in the mine's fields and crushed into themselves by the intense gravitational pull. When two commandos attempted to flank her, she ducked, rolled, and used her wrist gun gauntlets to deflect their fire, tossing another mine that imploded their cover and sent them tumbling into the snow. The attackers weren't amateurs, though. They retaliated with coordinated precision. A pair of them launched EMP grenades toward Roy's mech, forcing him to deploy a magnetic shield. The grenades detonated in a flash, briefly shorting his visual systems. For a moment, he was blind. Harms, reboot optics. Roy barked, heart pounding. Working. 2 seconds, the AI replied, but 2 seconds felt like a lifetime. Through the static on his display, he could hear the sound of footsteps approaching fast. Roy, duck. Fiva's voice cut through the chaos. Instinctively, Roy crouched the mech just as Fiva leaped onto its chassis, vaulting over him and slamming into the enemy with a devastating kick. She landed gracefully, firing her energy blade directly into the commando's chest. With his visuals restored, Roy grinned. Remind me to never underestimate you. Consider it a lesson, she teased, her amber eyes flashing with determination. Despite the overwhelming odds, the pair fought as a seamless unit, their trust in each other unshakable. Roy used the mech's arm-mounted cannon to suppress larger groups, while Fiva took out stragglers, her smaller frame allowing her to move where the mech couldn't. The snowfield was soon littered with scorch marks and the remnants of the commando squad's equipment. By the time the last enemy fell, the battlefield was eerily silent, the blizzard masking the destruction with a fresh layer of snow. Roy stepped out of the mech, his legs shaky but his adrenaline still surging. Steam rose from the suit as it powered down. Fiva approached him, her violet skin streaked with soot but her smile victorious. She extended a hand to him, pulling him up from the cockpit. Not bad for a human, she said, her tone teasing but warm. And not bad for a troublemaker, he replied, brushing snow off his jacket. Their eyes met, and for a moment, The battlefield around them seemed to fade away. That evening, as they sat together in his quarters, Roy found himself staring at the alien woman who had turned his life upside down. "So, what now?" he asked. Fiva tilted her head, considering. "Now we figure out how to survive my family's wrath, and maybe we see if a human and a VS can build something worth fighting for." Roy smirked. "Who knew saving you would make me the galaxy's unluckiest diplomat?" Fiva grinned, leaning closer. "You call it unlucky, I call it fate." And for the first time in years, Roy found himself smiling at the thought of tomorrow.